Welcome to Lawyer Business Advantage. This podcast is dedicated to helping attorneys earn more money, get better clients, and spend more time with family. I'm your host, Alay and founder of law firm Success Group. Smart business guidance for small law firms begins in 3, 2, 1. It's my pleasure to welcome to Lawyer Business Advantage Michelle Bomberger, founder and CEO of Equinox Business Law Group. Michelle, welcome to the program today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really interested to chat with you about a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart, which is breaking the traditional legal model for client success. And the way I interpret that is law firms are doing things in a certain way, and there's better ways to do things, business models that law firms really need to be exploring that can better serve their clients. And a lot of that really kind of focuses around business and corporate law. Tell us a little bit about your firm and how you got into this area of law.
Yeah. So it's been a journey. We just celebrated 19 years in business. So we've been doing this for a while.
Congrats.
Yeah, and I come from a business background. And so that was always sort of likely where I would go. And didn't start out in law, started out in business. And my corporate job was kind of at risk. I had small children at home and decided it was time to venture out and do this thing that had been on my mind for a while.
Wow. What made you decide to become an attorney?
It's a great question. So I was working in consulting right out of undergrad, and one of my favorite clients was a small department of a city government, and they were so happy to have us there, serving them, helping them to implement this system that they were putting in place. Whereas most Fortune 500 businesses were like, just please leave us alone. And so I decided to go back to school to get my MBA to serve small businesses as a consultant. And as I was looking at the programs out there, the JD MBA program really stood out to me. I thought that I could be a better consultant if I had this sort of legal perspective. It would be a nice differentiator out in the marketplace. And so I never actually planned to practice. But coming out of school was in the middle of the dot-com boom. And the opportunity for business-focused lawyers was really, really powerful. And so that's kind of where I headed right out of school.
Wow. Well, congratulations. It's not very often that I hear about someone who was in business and then ventured into law. Oftentimes I kind of see it the other way around. So how has it been for you coming out of a business with a business background, getting into law firms? What were some of your initial thoughts of how law firms were being run?
Well, the good part of the story is that I never actually ended up in a law firm. So when I started this business, which happens to be a law practice, but when I started this business, I had never practiced law anywhere. And so I was really starting from the ground up. And I had a vision around the gaps that I saw in the market. And that was mostly just more anecdotal, more my experience being in the small business clinic in law school. And I knew that there was a better way as a business person to provide legal services to businesses.
What were some of the issues that you saw?
Yeah, I think in business specifically, I think other practice areas obviously have their own issues, but in business specifically, I think smaller companies don't rise to the attention of lawyers in certainly big firms, and so they want to work with people who have a breadth of experience, breadth of knowledge. But once they get into those firms, they don't get the responsiveness that they need. And I think the industry is, fairly comfortable with, well, it kind of takes what it takes. And that's really scary and uncomfortable for a business that's just trying to get it done. Whatever it is, they're just trying to get it done. And when it is slow, I mean, I've seen situations where we're doing a M&A transaction and, you don't hear back from the lawyer for 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, it's challenging. And then on top of that, the complete question mark around what it's going to cost, right? You don't know if it's going to be $1,000 or $10,000, and that keeps people from calling. And I think that's the biggest issue in the corporate practice that we have is we really want people to call. We want them to be proactive because that's what we do best, right? What we do best is the thinking and the planning and the proactive work. But they're not going to call me to talk about their strategy. They're not going to call me to talk about their 3-year plan unless I can take the cost of that call off the table.
Got it. And so that fear of cost seems to really override a lot of the client's ability to take advantage of legal counsel.
Yeah, I think there's a cost paired with the perception of value as well, right? So if the attorney doesn't understand the business, the attorney is providing them with something that appears to the client as being boilerplate, I would say, or they would say, um, they don't know what they're getting. They don't know how to use it, right? And so, given that now they're paying for something that they don't know how to use, and they're not going to call back to ask how to use it because that's going to just cost more money. So I think one of the differentiators is being really business centric and understanding that especially smaller businesses, they tend to be fairly risk tolerant. And they want someone who gets it, like who understands the business issues. It's more emotional, it's financial, there's a lot of things going on there that's not risk.
Yeah, and we work with our small law firm clients. Several of them are business transaction law firms, and they have a lot of the same comments. And the way that they've kind of addressed a lot of those issues is they work with clients on a retainer, like a flat fee basis, usually on a monthly basis, I think. How have you sort of addressed that?
Yeah, so what we've developed is an outsourced general counsel model. So what we want to be is the general counsel that large companies have, but for smaller businesses, right? So when you think about why does Microsoft in my neck of the woods have one and more general counsels, it's not the firefighting, it's the planning, it's the thinking, right? And the smaller companies don't have access to that, so they're at a disadvantage. So what we've done is we've built a model that looks forward a certain period of time, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and says, what do we want to accomplish? What does this business want to and need to accomplish? And they get to lead that, right? I mean, we're going to contribute our 2 cents, but they get to lead it because often they have a few things that they know need to be done, employee handbooks, partnership agreements, the
Sure.
things that just never percolate up to the top, estate plans. And so we say, we're going to make sure those things get done. We're going to lead it and we're going to make sure those things get done. And in addition, when those other things pop up, I got a letter from Labor and Industries. I got an employee came in and just quit. Call us. It's all included. And so by doing that, we create some of that habit or that muscle memory to actually call because there's no risk to doing so. And then they start to learn what legal actually looks like in the business, how much influence it has in the business. And once we can create that, then we can go forward. So it's a forward-looking fixed price plan that includes known things and unknown things. Things like deals are really hard because, as you know, I'm sure deals can take a left turn quite quickly. And so be interested in how other folks are doing fixed prices for deals because we do it, but it's always a challenge.
Yeah. So when, our clients are doing deals specifically, sometimes they'll do fixed price and then we have a conversation because they oftentimes get burned on them. So one of the things that we've done with our clients is they'll sometimes structure that into phases of the deal, right? So the negotiation part could take a very long time. Maybe that's done on an hourly basis. And then also sometimes if they're on the sell side, sometimes there is a success fee attached to the end of it, at the back end of the transaction, to kind of make up for all the, potential lost time that might happen during it. I love this idea of setting that retainer on, every 3 to 6 months, based on what the client wants to achieve, because that way you can really estimate the amount of capacity that's needed. And that's one question I had for you is it's really challenging for a lot of law firms that are trying to go to the retainer type of model to figure out what their capacity is for taking on these clients. How have you sort of addressed that?
It has been a journey. Like that is one of the more challenging pieces. We use a utilization methodology, which is pretty common in consulting, less common in legal, which is a certain percentage of your total time is expected to be client facing. We don't use billable hours in the same way. We track time, but we don't use billable hours in the same way. And so really trying to understand what are the barriers to a lawyer achieving that target? And how do we pull as much as we can off of their plate that's not client-facing activities. And so that's been a lot of work there because we need their help to understand where is this time going. And that takes time, right? It takes time to evaluate where your time is going. And so as part of the work that we've done in that area is we've built a project management team because, again, our projects are these sort of long-term engagements, long meaning multiple months, and we need to be able to monitor what's happening. How's the client using it? Are they using more than expected? Are they using less than expected? And when do we need to make an adjustment? And what we've learned also is that how do we can leverage that project management team to do a whole lot of the administrative stuff that lawyers were doing previously, which has been they're very grateful that they're not doing that stuff anymore.
I'm sure. Um, Two things really jumped out at me there that I love the idea of a project management team first and foremost. I think a lot of law firms should consider doing more of that than they do, which is, a paralegal and an office admin trying to do some sort of management. But the two things that really stood out for me, one is your consulting background has really informed how you run your law firm, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it has. It's funny because, I'm a, Gen Xer, and when I came out of school and, went into consulting, like you like beat your chest because you worked your 60 or 70 hours that week. And that's not the world that we live in anymore. And I think that's a positive thing overall. And so trying to figure out what that capacity number is, what that utilization number is in a small firm like ours, where people do have to get their hands dirty in lots of different areas. We don't have everything is outsourced to the rest of the company, like a large consulting firm. Um, so what is the right number to be a good place to work, to live up to the values that we have set forth, which is, we want you to take vacations. We want you to have time off. We want you to not check your phone at 10 o'clock at night or be expected to work like that. So balancing that number has been a really interesting conversation. And what is the denominator in that math, right? Is that denominator 40 hours, 45 hours, 50 hours? And we really, it helps us to kind of double check who we say we are and managing capacity to meet that lifestyle that our team expects.
Yeah, it's so much more than a math problem, right? It really says a lot about your firm's culture. There is a financial component to it that has to be incorporated, and then of course it hits the attorney because that's the expectation for them. So there's a lot of things that inform that number. The other thing that you said that really stood out to me, and I'd like to repeat this for the sake of our audience, is that you all track your time. And even though, and attorney entrepreneurs, those of you that are doing flat fees, please, 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 you have got to track your time. If you think it's important for attorneys who bill hourly, it's at least as important for attorneys who bill on a flat fee basis because um, attorneys who bill hourly, they always know what their costs are and they can just work harder if the work gets too much. Attorneys who are on a fixed fee, even if you work harder to get the job done, you're not going to be able to charge anymore. So you really need to understand your costs and you really need to be able to plan out what your capacity is like. Michelle, what are your thoughts?
100%. And it's a battle. And sometimes it's surprising because you're like, okay, when you come into this industry, like tracking time is a thing, right? There's kind of no way around it. And so the fact that it is a battle has always been a little bit surprising to me. And we've tried many different ways of doing it. We've tried tracking every minute of the day because then at least at the end of the day, you're like, I was sitting here for 10 hours. What did I do? That's not popular. And then we have done only client-facing time as kind of a flip side of that. The challenge with that is then we don't know where the 2 or 3 hours went, right? And so we can't help the team to take things off their plate or be more efficient if we don't know where that time went. But for purposes of profitability, client profitability, it's important to be able to say we anticipated, this many hours in the month for across all of our clients or across one client, and we know that in any given month that's going to be blended, right? So some are going to be higher, some are going to be lower, and it should sort of sit within a certain range of expectation. That's how we're going to look at capacity. And so it's essential. And as we look at things like AI as a tool, we need to get more and more efficient. And the great thing about the work that those of us who do fixed price are in is that we're already ahead of the game, right? We know we can do this, and all AI and these other tools are going to do is make us more efficient. And if we can leverage that, we can do one of two things. One is increase our profitability, or two, reduce the price and access more people, right? And so for us, one of the things we're trying to work on is, we have our target client, which is slightly larger, more sophisticated company, but how do we bring this solution to a price point that smaller businesses can access? Because everybody needs it. But the more efficient we can be, the better we're going to be able to bring that to a wider market.
That's really well said. And just for the audience's sake, just dial it down to the basics of the emergence of AI. How do you see that impacting firms that bill by the hour?
Well, if something used to take you, 5 hours to do, and AI can do it in 30 minutes, and you spend another 30 minutes reviewing it, you can't bill 5 hours anymore,
That's it.
right? I mean, so what are you going to do with those hours? I mean, obviously you can bring on more clients, but the model of hourly, I think customers are going to challenge some of that pricing. The wonderful thing I think is that it gets lawyers doing the work that lawyers should be doing. And when I say should be doing, I mean, in law school, they don't teach you how to write a contract, right? At least when I went to school, they didn't teach us how to write contracts. They taught us how to think about a contract, right? So our really strongest use is not what LegalZoom does. Our strongest use is helping the client to understand legal in their business and being a lot more strategic and proactive with them. And so I think what AI is going to be able to do is to allow us to do more of that.
For sure. And how AI rolls out is going to be very interesting, especially for the legal community. Is every firm going to have their own AI that's based on their experience and their data, or are there going to be solutions out there across, covering an entire practice area? I'm sure there's going to be both, and how that's going to roll out is going to be interesting. But one thing is for darn sure, people are going to be able to get things done in a fraction of the time that it used to take, especially the routine tasks. And that's going to have to be accounted for in some way.
And I do think that that's a really important point is that, yes, we can look at, AI from a attorney productivity, which is, again, obvious. And there are many tools already developed out there. But maybe the harder solution, and maybe the more valuable solution is where do we have all these manual processes on the administrative side of our businesses, right? How do we automate the engagement letter? How do we automate the proposal? How do we automate the workflow behind the scenes? Those things are through either your current system. So if you're using a law practice management software, most of them are like, we're doing AI, we're doing AI. Okay, well, what does that mean, right? What is the workflows that you want to fix? And then figuring out, what does it take to fix those workflows and what is the ROI in doing that? So that I think there's a huge opportunity, but it's a little harder because it's not just off the shelf necessarily.
Right. You got to work at it and really build that in your firm. Speaking of which, what are some things you're excited about for your firm over the next, year or two?
Yeah, so I mentioned you earlier, we operate on the Entrepreneur Operating System, the EOS methodology, and we just earlier today had our quarterly state of the company. So I am totally jazzed and ready to go for the rest of the year. Um, we have been offering this solution since about 2009. And I wish I would have been able to scale it sooner. I wish I would have been able to do more faster. But I wasn't. And about 3 years ago, we put a stake in the ground and said, this is what we do. We're not going to offer all of the other options because once we can offer the other options, it gives folks the opportunity to do that.
Mhm.
And we really want to do this. So in the last year, we have really, I think, reined in the process in the system. So the next 2 years is really about scaling. So really looking at how do we onboard new clients onto this system? How do we ensure we retain them? So we're providing the value throughout their life cycle. How do we retain them? And then how do we build a solution that is broader, that really gives us access to more companies and actually gives those companies access to what we offer because I think they need it. So figuring that piece out, and then obviously the right people. People is always such a core part of the business. And so what do we need to hire and when and getting the right people on board?
Totally. Michelle, tell us a little bit about your ideal client.
Sure. That question I think is always hard because people want numbers and such, but I think there are two key things that make a good client for us. One is that they have a growth mindset. So the leadership team wants to grow a smart company. They typically work with outside advisors. They're comfortable with fractional services. Maybe they're using a coach. They know they can't do it by themselves. And so they probably have a lawyer. They probably don't have a relationship with a lawyer. And so what we bring to them is really valuable. And so that growth mindset and desire to grow a smart company is number one. Number two is the business needs to have enough moving parts, right? There's got to be stuff happening. Contracts coming in and out, number of employee issues, governance changes. There's stuff happening on a regular enough basis that they need counsel at least, once a month, or they have a number of projects to tackle. So those are the two kind of key things that we talk about. There are certain industries that fit this really well. Staffing is one, lots of contract, lots of people.
Sure.
Construction has a lot of big contracts and a lot of people issues. And there's a lot of consolidation as well happening in both those industries. Licensed professionals, so doctors, architects, lawyers, the kinds of people who don't want to deal with the business compliance and business stuff. And so that's another really great group. So we've got a number of industries that really fit nicely into this model.
Very cool. Well, I'm really excited to hear about what you've done, and you have some really good ambitions for the future, which is exciting. If people want to connect with you, Michelle, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. There's a form on our website. You can just find me on the bios, and there's a form there where you can reach out directly. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So just Michelle Bomberger. I think I'm the only one out there. But feel free to connect with me there as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michelle, for being on the Lawyer Business Advantage podcast today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks so much.
Everyone, that's Michelle Bomberger, CEO and founder of Equinox Business Law Group. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Lawyer Business Advantage podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other new potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment in iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you tune in to listen. And I want to hear from you. So connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you think of this episode. And if you are a solo or an owner of a small law firm and you're looking to earn more money, attract better clients, or reduce your stress, we would love to talk with you to see how we can help. Request your free law firm assessment by visiting lawfirmsuccessgroup.com. Again, that URL is lawfirmsuccessgroup.com. We look forward to talking with you soon. Thank you for listening. My name is Alay Yajnik. Until next time, remember, you can seize freedom. You can embrace happiness. You can build your perfect practice.